Welcome back. You're watching News Center. The COP29 climate summit has concluded, and after much deliberations, the nations have decided to triple the new finance goal by 2035. Developed nations will provide $300 billion a year to help poorer nations cope with the perils of climate change from the previous target of $100 billion a year. This decision left developing nations disappointed and were hoping to be provided by at least $1 trillion for climate financing. India called the developed nations' move too little and too distant. The Indian delegation has called the $300 billion amount abysmally poor and paltry. Delegation of smaller island states and lesser developed nations walked out of the summit, citing their climate finance interests were being ignored. So how much do developing and underdeveloped nations need to cope with the impact of climate change? To discuss that and much more, we're joined by Vaibhav Chaturvedi, Senior Fellow at Council on Energy and Environment. Vaibhav, this was the primary reason why this COP was happening, to increase the ambition on climate finance and hopefully achieve the financing of $1.3 trillion a year. That has clearly not happened. Which other nations you think were instrumental in making sure that the financing goal is only increased from $100 billion a year, which was agreed upon in 2019, to $300 billion a year?
Thank you. Very good evening and thank you for having me on the show. I think it is very clear it was the developed world, especially Europe, that was kind of hell-bent on not increasing the amount. The developing world was very clear in terms of its ask. It asked for over 1.1 trillion annually by 2035. Because that is what the needs assessment shows. So the demand on developing country was not baseless. It is based on certain analysis, based on the needs, that is, the requirements of finance for pushing towards or accelerating ambition towards the net zero goal. The developed world kind of simply didn't budge beyond $300 billion, which is a paltry amount compared to what is the requirement. So yes, this is a very abysmal kind of, and it's a huge letdown essentially. And the fight towards this 1.5 degree C goal, I think this is the final nail in the coffin. And Europe has especially kind of delivered this blow. So yeah, that's how I'll put it.
Right. You know, India came out with an extremely strong statement. I'd like to quote them now. Yes. We had informed the presidency, we had informed the secretariat that we wanted to make a statement prior to any decision on the adoption. However, and this is for everyone to see, this has been stage managed and we are extremely disappointed with the outcome. Why do you think India called this stage managed? Was India somehow not kept privy to what happened in the end, or what was happening with the climate finance end?
Yes. I think the way the process happens in the closing plenary, the more like inclusive and equitable process is that the presidency kind of says that this is the text, this is the final text, or rather the draft text. And are there any comments by any countries? And that's the time where many countries kind of, intervene and say that we don't agree. So that's why this is not really, this shouldn't be the deal. But the presidency simply kind of announced that this is the text, and then didn't even allow any comments to come, and just the hammer was kind of placed on the table, which means that the deal is done. And after then everybody started congratulating each other. And then, but after that, India very clearly entered and said that, well, you didn't even look at our raised flag that we had as an intervention, and you clearly ignored it. And this does appear to be stage managed. So this is the process. The way the process should have been followed was not followed. And that is why the strong words that you saw coming from India were in response to this kind of very unfortunate process, the way it kind of panned out.
Right. China was silent through the adoption process, showing its tacit approval. Why was China quiet? What role did China play in these negotiations on the climate finance ambition?
Yeah. China has a very peculiar role, because one of the big demands of the developed world was that the donor base should be increased. Essentially, China is, as you know, it's a big economy, but also it is investing around the world, especially through the BRI investments. So the developed world wanted the donor base to grow for climate finance. China very smartly is sitting within this G77 plus China group, which is essentially a developing country bloc. In fact, in the way the negotiation process happens is more than the individual countries. I think the groupings are also extremely important, because these are the negotiating groups. So the G77 plus China group, always it kind of the demands of all the, let's say, 1 trillion finance, or let's say 441 billion of grants, pure grants, All these were a part of, let's say, the G77 demands, and China is a part of it. So no country needs to specifically mention anything. In that sense, the group already lays down the collective, requirement by all the members of that particular group. So in that sense, China was involved in the process, but China was very smartly not making any noise because well, it was the target of the developed world, China plus Saudi Arabia, because both of these are very rich economies, but they very comfortably sit under the developing economies categorization. So that was the position. It kind of very smartly just kept mum throughout the process. It also does not need money.
Right.
Why was India so much, vehement and kind of disappointed? Is because India does need money. I mean, our economy, we don't want to move, let's say, fiscal money to the climate kind of low carbon interventions as compared to the education, health and infrastructure related demands, which are also huge for a fast growing economy. China is in a very comfortable space.
Vaibhav,
everybody knows, nobody, China will
Dr.
not take
Vaibhav,
money. That everybody knows. Yeah.
Okay, Dr. Vaibhav, now, as far as this COP is concerned, where does this leave India with its financing, climate financing needs per year? What are our needs? What is the shortfall? And if there is a shortfall, how are we going to possibly fund that?
I think it depends, various estimations for India. CEEW's estimate is by 2070, collectively, we'll need around $10 trillion between, let's say, 2020 and 2070. The global number was till 2035, we need like 1 trillion number for all the developing economies collectively. And the number on financing has to be looked in view of how much ambitious do you want to get in terms of decarbonization. So it's very closely connected. If you don't give us finance, I mean, forget that we're going to be ambitious. It is that kind of thing, So if developed world has now not given any meaningful finance, all the talks of ambition, like you have to do more on, let's say moving away from coal towards solar or move towards electrification in the transport sector, all those accelerated actions, they very clearly take a hit. And all the money that is also coming is also not in terms of grant or low cost finance. It is coming on high cost loans. African economies very clearly said that it is leading to high indebtedness in many of these economies because it is not there. Historically, they're not responsible, but they are not forced for these interventions through high cost loans. It's very bad for their economies. So nobody's happy about not just the money, but also the form in which money will come, which is mostly not really grants. So yes, it doesn't leave India in a very good situation. Ultimately, that means whatever our targets we take, it is going to be financed by domestic money. Not a kind of a very happy situation as far as pushing ambition is considered,
All right, Dr. Vaibhav, thank you very much for joining us with that perspective on how COP29 has been disappointing for India, and India saying that they definitely do not accept the agreement and adoption of text on climate finance, which increases it from $100 billion a year to $300 billion a year, saying that this is completely staged managed and the views of the developing world, including India, was not taken into account. With that, it's a wrap on this edition of News Center. More news and updates continue right here.